Maya Cross stood at the edge of the crystalline amphitheater and felt her heart pound against her ribs like a war drum. The structure rose around her in impossible spirals of blue and silver stone that seemed to glow from within. Thousands of Sylvari filled the seats above, and they watched her with eyes that shimmered like starlight. She had never felt so small and so exposed in her entire life. The diplomatic mission had gone wrong from the very first moment. Maya and her crew had traveled 6 months through folded space to reach this hidden system. The Sylvari had kept themselves secret behind a barrier of twisted gravity for over 3,000 years. When humanity finally cracked the mathematical code to send a peaceful message, through that wall the response had been immediate and strange. They were invited, but only under specific conditions. Only a small ship. Only a handful of representatives. No weapons larger than a sidearm. Admiral Kate Morrison had chosen Maya to lead the contact team. Maya was young for a lieutenant, but she had survived the brutal fighting at the Kepler colonies, where half her squadron had been lost to raiders. She knew how to think fast and stay calm when everything went to hell. The Admiral said those skills would matter more than rank when meeting an unknown alien. Maya had agreed, but now she wondered if the Admiral had sent her here to fail. The Sylvari looked like the elves from ancient Earth legends, but more real and more dangerous. They were tall and lean, with skin in shades of pale silver and deep bronze. Their eyes held colors that did not exist in human genetics, and their movements carried a grace that seemed almost like slow motion. They wore armor that looked like living metal flowing across their bodies in organic patterns. When they spoke, their language sounded like wind through crystal chimes. Princess. Sierra Night Whisper was the most beautiful and terrifying of them all. She stood across the arena floor wearing armor of deep crimson and black that seemed to absorb light. Her hair fell past her shoulders in waves of silver white, and her eyes burned with an inner fire that was literally golden. She carried 2 curved blades at her hips in the way. She stood, made it clear she knew exactly how to use them. But it was the dragon behind her that made Maya want to run. Emberfang was massive beyond comprehension. His body stretched over 30 meters from snout to tail, and his scales gleamed like molten rubies in the light of the twin suns overhead. Wings folded against his sides looked large enough to block out the sky when spread. Smoke curled from his nostrils with each breath, and his eyes watched Maya with an intelligence that was absolutely not animal. This was a thinking being, and one that had probably lived longer than human civilization itself. The princess had made her challenge. 2 hours ago in the Grand Council chamber, Maya could still hear every word echoing in her mind. The Sylvari had gathered, all the human diplomats before their throne. And Sierra had spoken in perfect English, which had been shocking. Enough on its own, she said that the Sylvari did not trust easily, and that humans were unknown and potentially dangerous. She said that her people valued strength and honor above all things, and that they would only ally with those who could prove both. Then she had turned her golden eyes directly on Maya and issued the challenge. That changed everything. Defeat me in honorable combat, and humanity gains not only alliance, but my hand in marriage, binding our peoples forever. Refuse, and humanity will be marked as cowards and barred from our space for all time. The arena had fallen silent then. Every human diplomat had gone pale. Ambassador Claire Roberts had immediately started to refuse on behalf of everyone, but Maya had felt something shift inside her chest. She thought about the colonies that had burned while she watched from space, unable to help. She thought about the children who had died because humanity was not strong enough, or fast enough, or brave enough. She thought about how many more would die if they could not. Forged new alliances in a galaxy that did not care about their survival. Maya had stepped forward before she could talk herself out of it and accepted the challenge. Now she stood in the NU arena and wondered if she had just killed herself for nothing. The rules had been explained through a translator device. Fight until one surrenders or falls. Death is forbidden by ancient law, but injury is expected and accepted. Use any weapon or technique you wish. The combat ends when it ends, and no one may interfere once it begins. Simple and brutal and completely insane. Maya wore her combat exosuit, which was the best technology humanity had developed. It enhanced her strength by a factor of 10 and provided energy shields that could stop most projectiles. Her helmet display gave her tactical information and threat analysis. She carried a plasma rifle and a shock baton as backup. Against a normal human opponent, she would have overwhelming advantage. Against a centuries-old alien warrior, Princess bonded to a fire-breathing dragon she felt. Like a child with a toy sword, Sira raised one hand, and the crowd fell completely silent. She spoke in Sylvari, and her voice carried across the arena without amplification. The translator in Maya's ear provided the words a half-second later. She said that this human had shown courage by accepting, and that courage was the first test. She said that the combat would reveal truth, and that truth was sacred to the Sylvari above all things. She said that she would fight with honor and expected the same in return. Then she drew both her blades and they burst into flames that burned white-hot. Without consuming the metal, Emberfang raised his massive head and roared. The sound was physical force that hit Maya like a shockwave and rattled her bones inside her body. Fire exploded from his jaws and scorched the air above her head in warning. The heat was intense even through her suit's thermal protection. The message was clear enough. If Maya tried to run, the dragon would turn her to ash before she took 3 steps. Maya checked her rifle's charge and activated her shield. The air in front of her shimmered as the energy barrier came online. Her suit's computer began analyzing Sira's movements, looking for patterns and weaknesses. The tactical display showed multiple threat warnings and recommended immediate retreat. Maya dismissed the warnings with a thought. She had not come 6 months through space to retreat now. Sira began walking forward, and her stride was unhurried and confident. Emberfang moved with her like a living shadow, keeping pace at her side. The dragon's eyes never left Maya, and smoke continued to pour from his nostrils in steady streams. They moved like they had fought together for lifetimes, because they probably had. Maya raised her rifle and fired. The plasma bolt screamed across the arena at supersonic speed and hit Sira's shield in an explosion of purple light. The princess did not even slow down. Her armor had its own energy protection, and Maya's opening shot had done nothing except announce the fight had started. The crowd above began to cheer. The sound was rhythmic and almost musical, like a battle chant from ancient times. Maya realized they were cheering for both fighters, not just their princess. The Sylvari wanted to see a real contest, not an execution. That was something at least Maya fired 3 more shots in rapid succession, aiming for different angles, trying to overwhelm Sira's shield. 2 missed as the princess dodged with impossible speed. The 3rd hit, but again did nothing. Sira was now halfway across the arena and closing fast. Behind her, Emberfang spread his wings, and the span was absolutely enormous. The dragon crouched low, preparing to spring forward. Maya made a split-second decision and ran. Not away, but to the side, angling for the cover of the stone pillars that dotted the arena floor. Her suit boosted her speed, and she covered 30 meters in seconds, but it was not enough. Emberfang launched himself into the air with a sound like thunder in his shadow. Fell over her like nightfall. Fire rained from above. Maya threw herself into a roll and felt the heat wash over her back as flames turned the ground. She had been standing into bubbling glass. Her shield flickered and her suit alarms screamed warnings about thermal overload. She came up running and dove behind a pillar just as another gout of flame hit the other side. The stone held, but Maya could feel it radiating heat like a furnace. Sira was suddenly there. She had covered the distance in seconds, and her burning blade came down in an overhead strike that would have split Maya in half. Maya barely got her shock baton up in time to block. The impact sent vibrations up her arms even through the suit's enhancement, and she was driven to one knee by the force. Sira was impossibly strong. The princess pulled back and struck again from a different angle. Maya blocked but was forced to give ground. Another strike, and Maya realized she was being systematically dismantled. Sira fought with technique refined over centuries, and every movement was precise and economical. She was not trying to overpower Maya, but to break down her defense. Piece by piece, until nothing remained, Maya activated her suit's jump jets and rocketed backward out of melee range. She fired her rifle on full automatic as she flew, and this time, some shots got through. Sira's shield flickered under the sustained barrage, and one bolt scorched her shoulder armor. The princess snarled, and that was the first real emotion Maya had seen from her. Then, Emberfang was there again. His tail whipped around faster than anything that large should be able to move and caught Maya in midair. The impact crushed her shield completely and sent her tumbling across the arena floor. She hit hard, and her suit's damage indicators. The dragon's flame came like the wrath of a dying star, and Maya had nowhere left to run. She threw herself flat and felt the fire pass, so close above her that her suit's exterior temperature sensors simply stopped working. The metal of her armor glowed cherry red, and the inside temperature began climbing toward lethal levels. Her cooling system was already damaged from the tail strike, and now it was failing completely. Maya rolled to the side as another blast hit where she had been lying, and the ground turned to molten glass. Her vision swam from heat exhaustion and pain. Every breath felt like inhaling knives. The suit that had seemed like such an advantage was now becoming an oven that would cook her alive if she did not end this soon. Sira advanced again, and now the princess moved with true intent. The testing phase was over. Maya had proven she could fight back, but that was not enough to win. Sira's blades wove patterns in the air that left trails of fire, and each strike came faster than the last. Maya blocked desperately, but her movements were slowing. Her enhanced strength was failing as the suit's power cells drained. Her body was reaching its limits. The shock baton shattered under a particularly vicious strike, and Maya was left with nothing. Sira's follow-up slash cut across Maya's chest, and though the armor held the impact through her backward, she hit the ground hard, and this time she could not get up immediately. Her body simply would not respond. Every system was screaming warnings, and her medical readouts showed dangerous levels of fatigue and heat stress. Through her cracked visor, Maya saw Sira standing over her. The princess raised one blade for a finishing strike that would end the duel. Maya tried to move, but her muscles would not obey. She had given everything, and it had not been enough. Humanity would be marked as weak, and the alliance would fail, and more colonies would burn, because she had not been strong enough. Then something inside Maya refused. To accept that ending, she reached up with one hand not to block but to grab. Her suit's strength enhancement was nearly gone, but her own natural desperation gave her speed. She caught Sira's wrist just as the blade came down and twisted hard. The princess was caught off guard by the move and stumbled. Maya used that moment to rip her helmet off, because she could not see properly through the cracked visor, and she could not breathe in the superheated air inside anymore. Fresh air hit her face like cold water. Maya sucked in a breath and tasted ozone and smoke in her own blood. She still held Sira's wrist, and now she could see the princess's face clearly for the first time without the helmet display in the way. Sira's golden eyes were wide with something that might have been surprise or respect. Maya pulled herself up using Sira's arm as leverage and drove her other fist into the princess's midsection. It was a dirty move without honor or technique. Just a human woman hitting as hard as she could because she refused to lose. The punch connected and Sira grunted in pain. Her shield flickered from the kinetic impact. The crowd above began chanting again, but this time the rhythm was different. Faster and more urgent. Maya did not know what it meant, but she could feel the energy in the air change. Something about the fight had shifted in a way she did not understand. Sira pulled free and backed away. She looked at Maya with new eyes, and when she spoke, the translator caught her words. You fight without honor or grace, but with the spirit of a dying star. You refuse to accept defeat even when your body fails. This is not how we fight, but perhaps it is how you must fight. Maya did not have breath to respond. She just stood there swaying on her feet with blood running down her face from a cut above her eye. She had not even noticed getting. Her suit was barely functioning. She had no weapons left, but she was still standing. And that had to count for something. Emberfang moved closer, and the dragon's massive head lowered until his eyes were level with Maya's. She found herself staring into orbs of molten gold that held intelligence beyond human measure. The dragon studied her for a long moment while smoke curled from his nostrils. Then he did something completely unexpected. He pulled his flames back. Maya saw it happen. Emberfang's throat had been glowing with building fire, ready to release, but now the glow faded. The dragon made a sound that was not quite a growl and not quite a purr, something complex that the translator could not interpret. Then he stepped back and settled his wings against his sides in what Maya somehow knew was a gesture of approval. Sira saw it too. The princess turned to look at her companion, and they shared a moment of silent communication that Maya could not hear but could feel the weight of. Something important had just happened. Something that went beyond the simple rules of the duel. The princess turned back to Maya, and there was conflict in her expression now. She raised her blades again, but the aggressive certainty from before was gone. For the first time since the fight began, Sira looked uncertain. Maya took advantage of that hesitation. She forced her battered body forward in a stumbling charge that had no grace whatsoever. She was just a human woman in a broken suit throwing herself at an immortal warrior. Princess because giving up was not in her nature. It should have been pathetic, but somehow in that moment, it was magnificent. Sira blocked the wild punch. Maya threw and countered with a strike that should have ended the fight. But the princess pulled the blow at the last instant, and the blade stopped a hair's width from Maya's throat. They stood frozen in that position with both of them breathing hard. Maya's fist was cocked back for another punch. She no longer had the strength to throw. Sira's blade was positioned for a kill she was apparently unwilling to make. The moment stretched. Maya looked into Sira's golden eyes and saw something unexpected there. Not contempt or superiority, but recognition. The princess saw something in Maya that resonated with something in herself. Two warriors carrying burdens they could not put down. Two women trying to do the impossible because someone had to. Then Maya's legs finally gave out. She collapsed forward and Sira caught her on reflex. They went down together in a tangle of limbs and damaged armor. Maya tried to push herself up, but her body was done. She had pushed past every limit, and now the bill was coming due. Her vision darkened at the edges, and her muscles simply stopped responding. But she did not surrender. Even lying on the ground, unable to move, Maya refused to speak the words that would end the fight. She just lay there gasping for air and bleeding and absolutely unbroken in spirit if not in body. Sira pushed herself up to her knees and looked down at Maya with an expression that was complex beyond words. The princess's chest heaved from exertion, and for the first time her perfect composure was cracked. She looked tired and surprised, and something else that Maya could not quite identified above them. The crowd had gone completely silent again. Everyone waited to see what would happen next. The rules said the fight ended when one surrendered or fell. Maya had fallen but had not surrendered. Technically, the duel could continue until she did. But Maya was clearly unable to fight anymore. The question was whether that mattered. Sira seemed to be struggling with the same question. She stood slowly and looked at her companion. Emberfang watched his bonded partner with those ancient wise eyes. The dragon made another complex sound, and Sira's expression shifted. She nodded slowly, as if confirming something. The princess turned to address the crowd in Sylvari. Her voice carried clearly across the arena, and her tone was formal and commanding. The translator provided Maya with the words even as her consciousness began to slip away. Sira said that the human had fought with courage beyond measure. She said that Maya had refused to yield even when defeat was certain, and that this spoke to a strength of spirit worthy of respect. She said that by the strict letter of their law Maya had fallen, but that by the spirit of their law Maya had proven herself. She said that the duel had revealed truth as intended, and the truth was that humans were worthy of consideration. Then Sira said something that made the entire crowd erupt into shocked exclamations. She said that she herself was also at her limit and could not continue. She said that if the fight went on, they would both simply collapse again and again, until someone died from exhaustion, and that would violate the prohibition on death. She said that by her reading they had both fallen simultaneously, and therefore the duel was a draw. The High Council. Members in their special viewing box rose to their feet in protest. A draw was apparently unprecedented. Several of them began shouting in Sylvari, and even without translation, Maya could hear the anger and confusion in their voices. The situation was spiraling into chaos. Then Emberfang roared again. This time the sound was different, deeper and more resonant. It carried authority that made even the High Council members fall silent. The dragon raised his massive head high and spoke. His voice was like grinding mountains, and even through the translator the power in his words was undeniable. He said that he had lived for 7 centuries and seen countless duels. He said that never before had he seen a warrior refuse to yield as Maya had. He said that never before had he given his approval to an outsider, but that he gave it now. He said that Maya had earned his respect through her actions, and that his word carried weight that superseded council politics. The dragon said that if the council wanted to reject his judgment, they could, but that they would have to answer to him personally. Given that, the crimson peaks rose against the sky like the spine of some ancient sleeping god, and Maya felt insignificant standing at their base. The mountains stretched impossibly high with their summits disappearing into clouds that glowed red from the twin suns. The rocks themselves seemed to pulse with inner heat, and steam vents dotted the slopes, releasing sulfurous gases into the thin air. This was dragon territory, and every instinct Maya possessed screamed at her, "Turn around and leave." Sarah stood beside her, looking completely at ease in this hostile environment. The princess wore lighter armor now designed for climbing and movement rather than combat. Her silver hair was tied back, and her golden eyes scanned the peaks with the confidence of someone who had made this journey many times before. Emberfang perched on a rocky outcrop above them, watching the approach to the mountains with patient intensity. The past 3 weeks had been the strangest of Maya's life. After her body healed enough to move, the High Council had reluctantly approved Emberfang's demand that Maya attempt the dragon bonding ritual. Half the council still opposed the entire situation, but they could not refuse a dragon elder. Without risking consequences, nobody wanted. So Maya had been released into Sira's custody for the journey to the peaks where wild dragons made their homes. Those 3 weeks of travel had changed everything. At first, Sira had been formal and distant, treating Maya like a curiosity to be studied rather than a person. But forced proximity and shared challenges on the road had gradually broken down those walls. They had fought off predatory creatures together. They had shared meals around campfires under alien stars. They had talked about their lives and their worlds and slowly begun to understand each other. Maya had learned that Sira was the last surviving member of the royal bloodline after a plague had killed the rest decades ago. The princess carried the weight of her entire people's future on her shoulders, and the prophecy. That said, her choice of mate would either save or doom the Sylvari civilization. She had lived for over 2 centuries, but much of that time had been spent in duty and obligation rather than living freely. Sira had learned that. Maya came from a colony world that had been raided when she was 16. She had watched her home burn from orbit while serving in the defense fleet as a junior pilot. Most of her family had died in the attack, and Maya had spent the decades since trying to prevent the same fate from befalling others. The guilt and drive to protect people defined everything she did. They had both been surprised to find how much they had in common, despite coming from completely different species and worlds. They were both warriors who had seen too much death. Both carried responsibilities they had not asked for but could not put down. Both were lonely in ways they rarely admitted even to themselves, and both had started to feel something neither had expected when they looked at each other. Now they stood at the base of the Crimson Peaks preparing for the next impossible test. Sira had explained the ritual during their journey. Maya would climb into the mountains alone and seek out the wild dragons. Most would reject her immediately, either through indifference or violence. But if she could find one who saw something worth bonding with, then a connection would form. That connection would change Maya forever, linking her consciousness to an alien intelligence and granting her abilities that no human had possessed before. Only 12 Sylvari in all of history had. succeeded at bonding with wild dragons. The rest who attempted either came back alone or did not come back at all. The dragons were not cruel, but they were absolutely selective. They could sense something in potential partners that went beyond physical capability or intelligence. Something about the soul itself. Maya had asked what happened if no dragon accepted her. Sira had been quiet for a long moment before answering. She said that Maya would live, and the alliance would still proceed, but that she would not be fully accepted into Sylvari society. She would always be an outsider, tolerated but not embraced. And the marriage arrangement would be dissolved, because without a dragon bond, Maya could not truly be considered Sira's equal. The way Sira had said, that last part made Maya think the princess might actually be disappointed by that outcome now. Something had changed between them during the journey. The formal distance had become friendship, and friendship had started to become something more complicated. They had not spoken about it directly, but Maya felt it in the way Sira looked at her sometimes. In the moments when their hands brushed accidentally and neither pulled away, immediately Maya was terrified that she was reading too much into it, that she was projecting her own growing feelings onto someone who was just being kind. But late at night, when they sat by the fire and talked until the early hours, Maya thought she saw something in those golden eyes that matched what she felt. Now, Sira turned to face her, and the princess's expression was serious. She said that beyond this point, Maya would be alone. Dragons did not accept observers during the bonding trials, and even Emberfang would not accompany them higher. Sira would wait at the base camp but could not help if things went wrong. Maya would have to trust in herself and in fate. Maya asked how long the trial usually took. Sira said it varied wildly. Some found their match within hours. Others searched for weeks before succeeding or giving up. The longest recorded trial had lasted 3 months before ending in success. Sira said she would wait as long as necessary. There was something in the way she said it that made Maya's heart skip. As long as necessary, like Sira had nowhere else she would rather be. Maya nodded and tried to project confidence she did not entirely feel. She had survived the arena duel through determination and luck in roughly equal measure. This trial would require something different. She would have to open herself up in ways that made her vulnerable, and hope that some ancient dragon creature saw value. In what was revealed, Sira stepped forward. Suddenly, and before Maya could react, the princess embraced her. It was brief and almost awkward, like Sira was not entirely sure of the gesture. But her arms were strong and warm, and for a moment Maya let herself lean into the contact. When Sira pulled back, her golden eyes were bright with emotion she was clearly trying to hide. The princess said that Maya had already proven herself worthy regardless of what happened in the mountains. She said that Maya should return safely, and that was more important than success or failure. She said one more thing very quietly, that she would miss their conversations while Maya was gone. Maya smiled and said she would miss them too. Then before she could lose her nerve, she turned and began climbing. The rocks were hot under her hands, and the air thinned rapidly as she ascended. Behind her, she felt Sira's gaze following until distance and terrain blocked the line of sight. Then Maya was truly alone in dragon territory. The first 2 days were the hardest physically. The mountains were treacherous, and the heat was oppressive. Maya's environmental suit helped, but she still felt like she was being slowly cooked. She saw dragons flying in the distance, but none came close. They were massive shapes moving against the red clouds like legends come to life. On the 3rd day, Maya encountered her first dragon up close. It was a female with scales of deep emerald green, and she lounged on a rocky ledge watching Maya climb with obvious disinterest. Maya stopped and tried to project calm and respect. She spoke aloud, knowing the dragon probably could not understand her words, but hoping tone would carry meaning. The dragon yawned, revealing teeth the size of swords, and then simply looked away. Rejection without malice. Just complete indifference to Maya's existence. Maya continued climbing. Over the following days, she met 7 more dragons. Each encounter was different, but the result was always the same. Some watched her with curiosity before losing interest. One became aggressive, and Maya had to scramble away while fire scorched the rocks behind her. 2 ignored her completely. None showed the slightest interest in bonding. By the 10th day, Maya was exhausted and beginning to doubt herself. Maybe she was not special enough. Maybe whatever quality dragons looked for in partners simply did not exist in humans. Maybe she should give up and return to Sira with failure and learn to live with being an outsider. That night, Maya made camp in a small cave and sat staring at her supplies while despair crept in. She thought about the colonies that burned, about the people counting on her to forge this alliance, about Sira waiting below and what it would mean to return without success. The weight of it all pressed down until Maya felt like she could not breathe. Then she heard movement in the darkness outside the cave. Maya grabbed her plasma pistol and aimed at the entrance. A shape moved in the shadows, too large to be anything but a dragon. She tensed, waiting for fire or aggression. Instead, a head pushed into the cave opening and regarded her with eyes that swirled with colors between blue and violet. The dragon was smaller than most she had encountered, though still massive by any reasonable measure. His scales were azure blue with patterns of silver that caught the light. But what struck Maya immediately was the scarring. The dragon's hide was marked with old wounds that had healed but left their traces. Burns and claw marks and what looked like blade strikes. This was a dragon who had seen violence. He pushed further into the cave and Maya realized he was limping slightly. The celebration hall blazed with light from thousands of floating crystals that hovered in the air like captive stars. Music filled the massive chamber, combining Sylvari instruments that sang like wind chimes with human electronic synthesizers in a blend that should not have worked, but somehow did. Maya stood near the center of it all, wearing formal attire that was half human, military dress and half Sylvari ceremonial robes, and felt completely out of place despite being the guest of honor. The bonding ceremony had taken place at sunset. 3 days ago, in front of the entire city, Maya and Stormcaller had stood before the High Council and the gathered crowds, while ancient words were spoken and blessings given. The ritual was older than human civilization, and Maya had been the first outsider to ever participate. Half the Sylvari present had looked proud. The other half had looked like they wanted to protest but did not dare with Emberfang watching from above. Now the formal ceremony was done, and the political celebration had begun. Representatives from both species mingled throughout the hall, trying to turn a cultural moment into diplomatic advantage. Human ambassadors networked with Sylvari nobles. Military officers compared notes with dragon riders. Scientists from both sides discussed technology sharing in corners while trying to look casual. About it, Maya had spent the last 2 hours being introduced to important people whose names she immediately forgot and answering the same questions over and over. How did the bonding feel? What could she sense through Stormcaller? Did she think other humans could achieve the same thing? Each answer was analyzed for implications and political meaning until Maya wanted to scream. Sira had warned her this would happen. The princess was dealing with her own crowd of petitioners and well-wishers across the hall, and kept shooting Maya sympathetic glances whenever their eyes met. They had barely spoken since arriving at the celebration, despite Maya desperately wanting to continue the conversation they had started in the mountains. The one about what this growing thing between them meant and where it might lead. But politics demanded their attention, and privacy was impossible. So Maya smiled and nodded and tried not to think about how Sira had kissed her 3 days ago and how that kiss had not been repeated. Since Stormcaller's emotions flickered through their bond with amusement and gentle mockery. The dragon was perched on the grand balcony outside and could sense Maya's frustration. He sent reassurance mixed with the suggestion that Maya should just leave and come fly with him instead. Dragons apparently did not see the point of formal gatherings. Maya was seriously considering taking that advice when Ambassador Claire Roberts appeared at her elbow. The older woman had been skeptical of the entire mission from the start, and her expression now was carefully neutral. She said that Maya needed to come with her immediately, that there was a situation requiring urgent attention. Maya's combat instincts triggered instantly. Claire's tone was wrong, too controlled, and her eyes kept darting to the exits, like she was calculating escape routes. Maya asked what kind of situation, while her hand drifted toward where her sidearm would normally be. She was not armed at the celebration because weapons were forbidden at ceremonial events, but she suddenly wished she had ignored that rule. Claire said it was better, discussed in private, and gestured toward a side corridor. Maya glanced across the hall and caught Sira's attention. The princess saw Claire and frowned. She started to move toward them, but was blocked by a cluster of high council members demanding her attention. Sira looked frustrated, but could not simply push past them without causing offense. Maya made a decision and followed Claire toward the corridor. Stormcaller's alarm flared through their bond, but Maya sent reassurance back. She would be careful. She just needed to see what had Claire so spooked. They entered the corridor, and Claire led her deeper into the complex away from the celebration. The sounds of music faded behind them. The lighting grew dimmer. Maya's unease increased with every step. She asked again what was happening, and this time her tone carried command. Claire stopped and turned. Her expression was pained. She said she was sorry, that she had not wanted to do this, but that she had family back on Earth and they had been threatened, that some truths were too dangerous to allow. Then figures emerged from the shadows. 6 Sylvari, wearing dark armor without insignia. Their faces were covered by masks, and they moved with the coordinated precision of trained soldiers. Maya recognized a trap 1 second before it sprang shut. She reacted on pure instinct, spinning and driving her elbow into the nearest attacker's face. The Sylvari stumbled back with a broken nose, and Maya used that moment to run. She made it 5 steps before energy nets hit her from behind. The weapons wrapped around her body and delivered shocks that locked her muscles. She went down hard, unable to move. Through the bond, Stormcaller felt her distress, and his rage exploded like a bomb in her mind. Maya felt him launch from the balcony and start flying toward her location, but the palace was huge. He did not know exactly where she was. She tried to send him direction, but the shocks made it hard to think clearly. The masked Sylvari surrounded her. One spoke in accented English. He said that Maya should not have come to their world. That humanity was a corruption that would destroy everything the Sylvari had built. That this bond she achieved with Stormcaller was an abomination against natural order. That she had to die before the alliance could be finalized. Maya tried to respond, but her jaw would not work properly. The nets continued delivering shocks that kept her paralyzed. She was helpless and about to die in a corridor far from anyone who could help. All because she had trusted Claire, who was now backing away with tears streaming down her face. Then Sira was there. The princess came around the corner, like a silver comet with both blades drawn and burning. She took in the situation at a glance, and her expression went from confusion to cold fury. She demanded to know what was happening, and her voice carried absolute authority. The masked Sylvari turned to face her, and Maya saw them hesitate. Even assassins apparently thought twice about attacking royalty. Their leader made a decision and barked orders in Sylvari. 3 moved to engage Sira, while the other 3 stayed focused on Maya. The leader himself drew a blade that looked like it was made of black glass and advanced on the princess. He said that Sira had betrayed her people by entertaining this human alliance, that she had failed the prophecy and brought shame to the royal bloodline, that the Pale Hand would correct her mistakes even if it meant removing her from power. Sira's response was to attack. She moved faster than Maya had seen. Even in their duel, and her blades met the assassin's weapons in explosions of sparks. The corridor became a whirlwind of combat as the princess fought 3 opponents simultaneously without giving ground. She was magnificent and terrifying, but 3-on-1 was dangerous even for her. The assassins were skilled and coordinated, and they pressed hard. One got inside Sira's guard and slashed across her arm. Blood flowed bright silver, and the princess gasped in pain, but did not slow. She drove her blade through that attacker's shoulder, and he went down screaming. Maya fought desperately against the nets, but the energy fields held her immobile. Through the bond, she felt Stormcaller getting closer, but he was still too far away. She watched Sira fighting and bleeding and felt absolutely useless. This was her fault. The assassins had come for her, and Sira was paying the price. Then Emberfang arrived like the wrath of an angry god. The ancient dragon smashed through the corridor wall from outside because apparently going around was too slow for him. Stone and metal exploded inward, and the assassins scattered. Emberfang's roar shook the entire structure, and his flames turned two of them to ash before they could react. The survivors ran in different directions, abandoning their mission in favor of not dying. Sira stumbled and nearly fell. Her arm bled badly and her face was pale. Emberfang moved to her side, and the bond between them pulsed with concern. The dragon gently caught his partner before she could collapse and lowered her carefully to the floor. He made sounds that were clearly questions about her condition. Stormcaller burst through the hole in the wall moments later, and his emotions through the bond were pure protective rage. He saw Maya trapped in the nets, and smoke poured from his nostrils. He approached carefully and used his claws to tear the energy nets apart with surprising delicacy. The shocks finally stopped, and Maya gasped as control returned to her body. She crawled too, Sira immediately ignoring her own pain. The princess's wound was deep and needed treatment. Maya tore strips from her ceremonial robes and began binding the injury while Sira watched her with dazed golden eyes. The princess tried to speak, but Maya shushed her gently. There would be time for words later. Right now, Sira needed medical attention. Guards finally arrived along with human security personnel. They secured the corridor and called for healers. Claire Roberts was detained immediately, despite her protests that she had been coerced. The two surviving assassins who had not managed to escape were captured trying to reach the landing pads. In the chaos that followed, Maya stayed with Sira while healers worked on the princess's arm. The wound was serious, but not fatal. Sira would recover, but it would take time. Through it all, Sira kept her eyes on Maya. The void between worlds looked peaceful from the cockpit of Maya's fighter, but she knew that peace would not last. The embassy ship hung in space ahead like a massive silver needle surrounded by smaller escort vessels. Beyond it, the Silveri orbital platform curved against the backdrop of stars with docking ports extending like the petals of a mechanical flower. Everything looked calm and orderly, but Maya's sensors were screaming warnings about incoming hostile forces. Stormcaller flew beside her fighter. In the vacuum and his presence, through their bond was a steady warmth against the cold of space. He had adapted to void flight with surprising ease despite his damaged wing. Dragons apparently did not need air to breathe when they chose not to. He was more graceful here than he had been on the ground. Sira's voice came through the communication, channel sounding tense but controlled. She said that her scouts reported Theron's fleet was 10 minutes out and approaching fast. 20 combat ships with full crews plus at least 30 dragons carrying warriors. The enemy had numbers and firepower. What Maya and Sira had was coordination and desperation. The combined defense force was smaller than Maya would have liked. 8 human fighters, including hers, 12 Silvari Skyriders on dragons. The embassy ship itself, which had defensive weapons but was primarily a diplomatic vessel, not a warship. 3 escort frigates with better armament, but still not designed for major combat. They were outnumbered at least 2 to 1, and fighting in space, where any hull breach meant death. Maya checked her weapon systems for the 10th time and forced herself to breathe slowly. She had flown combat missions before, but never with stakes this high. If they failed here, hundreds would die, and the alliance would collapse before it truly began. Worse, she would lose Sarah, who was currently mounted on Emberfang and positioned near the platform's defensive batteries. The princess was a target, and they both knew Theron would try to kill her first. Through the bond, Maya felt Stormcaller's confidence and determination. The scarred dragon had something to prove, and he was eager to begin. His emotions steadied Maya's nerves. They had survived impossible situations before. They would survive this too. Captain Lisa Grant's voice came over the fleet channel from the embassy ship. She said that diplomatic channels were still open if anyone wanted to try reasoning with Theron one last time. Nobody responded. They all knew reason had failed already. Theron believed he was saving his people from corruption, and nothing would change. His mind except defeat, then sensors. Lit up with enemy contacts, and reasoning time was over. Theron's fleet emerged from behind the nearby moon, moving in tight formation. The ships were older Sylvari designs, but they had been modified with stolen military hardware, and they bristled with weapons. Dragons swarmed around them like schools of predatory fish, and their scales reflected starlight in shades of red and gold and green. It would have been beautiful if it was not so terrifying. The enemy commander broadcast on all channels, and Maya recognized Theron's voice, even through the translation. He said that this was humanity's last chance to withdraw peacefully. That if the embassy ship left immediately and promised never to return, the Sylvari would let them go unharmed. But if they stayed, Theron would destroy them and anyone who fought beside them. He said that Sira had betrayed her bloodline and her people, and would answer for her crimes. Sira responded with cold fury in her voice. She said that Theron was the betrayer, that he had let fear poison his judgment and lost sight of what the Sylvari truly stood for. That honor meant protecting the future, not clinging to the past. That she would stop him no matter what it cost, because that was her duty as princess and as someone who actually believed in something beyond her own fear. Theron's response was to order the attack. The void erupted into chaos. Enemy ships opened fire with energy weapons that lit space like lightning. The human fighters scattered into evasive maneuvers while returning fire with missiles and plasma bolts. Sylvari dragons dove and swooped, carrying warriors who fired crossbows that shot bolts of condensed energy. Explosions bloomed silently in the vacuum. Maya pushed her fighter into a hard turn that would have killed her without the inertial dampeners, and locked onto an enemy ship. She fired her missiles and watched them track through space before impacting the target's shields. The shields flickered, but held. She swore and fired again with her main guns. This time the combined damage punched through, and the enemy ship began venting atmosphere storm. Caller engaged a hostile dragon, and the two creatures twisted around each other in a deadly dance. The enemy dragon was larger and undamaged, but Stormcaller fought with intelligence and experience. He used his smaller size to stay inside the larger dragon's turning radius and struck at vulnerable joints and wing membranes. Fire exploded between them and both took damage, but Stormcaller came out ahead. The enemy dragon retreated, trailing smoke. Through the bond, Maya felt Stormcaller's satisfaction mixed with pain from new burns across his scales. She sent concern, but he brushed it off. He had survived worse, and this battle was too important to hold back. Across the battlefield, Sira and Emberfang coordinated the defense with ruthless efficiency. The ancient dragon's flames were far more powerful than any other, and he used them to devastating effect. Enemy ships melted under his assault, and hostile dragons fled rather than face him directly. Sira stood on his back in her full armor, directing fire from the platform's weapons and calling tactical commands to their scattered forces. But Theron had planned well, and numbers were telling. For every enemy they disabled, two more pressed forward. The human frigates were taking heavy damage, and one was already listing with multiple hull breaches. Dragons died on both sides, and watching them fall made Maya's heart ache. These were thinking creatures, not weapons, and they were dying for someone. Elsa's political vision, Maya's fighter took a hit that collapsed her shields completely. Alarms screamed, and she had to kill power to several systems to keep flying. She was a sitting target, and she knew it. An enemy ship moved in for the kill, and Maya prepared to eject when Stormcaller suddenly appeared between them. The dragon took the enemy's weapons fire across his already scarred hide and roared defiance. Maya used that moment to reboot her shields and fire back. The enemy ship exploded. Through the bondstorm, Caller sent reassurance, but Maya felt his pain. He had taken serious damage protecting her, and was flying on determination alone. She told him to fall back, but he refused. His emotions were absolutely clear. He would fight until she was safe, or he fell. That was what partners did. Maya blinked back tears and refocused on the battle. She would not let his sacrifice be for nothing. The fighting continued, and slowly the tide began to turn. The combined force fought with coordination that the enemy could not match. Human technology and Sylvari magic supported each other in ways that multiplied effectiveness. Fighters used their speed to draw fire while dragons hit from unexpected angles. Syrah's tactical genius kept their forces organized while the enemy descended into chaos, but Theron himself had not yet entered the battle, and Maya knew that meant something bad was coming. Her sensors detected a massive energy buildup from the flagship, and Maya understood the plan. Theron was charging some kind of super weapon, probably something stolen from old Sylvari military archives. He intended to destroy the embassy ship with one overwhelming strike and end this decisively. The buildup would take another minute, which meant they had 1 minute to stop him. Maya broadcast on all channels and said that the flagship was the priority target. Everyone who could move needed to hit it now before the weapon fired. She knew it was asking people to die. The flagship was heavily defended, and approaching it meant flying through concentrated fire. But if they did not try, everyone died anyway. Syrah acknowledged immediately, and Emberfang turned toward the flagship with flames, already building in his throat. Other dragons followed despite their injuries and fear. Human fighters formed up behind Maya as she led the desperate charge. This was it. Win here or lose everything. The enemy defenses opened fire with everything they had. Space, filled with energy bolts and missiles, and Maya's fighter twisted through the storm on instinct and luck. Stormcaller flew beside her, taking hits but refusing to slow. Emberfang led from the front, and his flames carved paths through the defensive fire that others could follow through. They closed on the flagship, and Maya could see the weapon charging in its forward section. The glow was building toward critical, and they had maybe 15 seconds left. Maya armed her last missiles and prepared to fire when Stormcaller sent urgent warning through the bond. Theron himself appeared riding a massive black dragon that had been hidden in the flagship's shadow. The counselor wore full combat armor and carried weapons that crackled with energy. His dragon was ancient and powerful, and absolutely massive. This was the final guardian, and Maya realized Theron had been waiting for someone to make exactly this kind of desperate attack. Syrah saw the threat and screamed for Maya
to evade.
But Maya knew there was no time. If she evaded, the weapon would fire and hundreds would die. So instead, she did something insane. She ejected from her fighter and used her suit's thrusters to push herself toward the flagship.